Good morning. The presenter this morning for the first presentation, which is entitled Defending the Sabbath, is Dr. Claude Verrechia. He comes to us from New Bowl College, where he is a professor of New Testament theology there, and he's going to be giving our presentation this morning, so I'd like to invite him to the stage at this time.
Good morning. I can tell you the weather is much better here than in New Bowl this morning. Raining cats and dogs, and the traffic conditions are absolutely poor. I was stuck more than 1 hour on the M40 due to an accident, and well, I was not sure to be able to make it, but here I am. Let me start with the story. Well, first of all, how many university students do we have in this audience? Let me check. I know there is at least one of my former students in front, all right? So I see some hands, all right, thank you. So that is the story. A story of a girl whose name is Sandra. Sandra was a university student. She was a second-year student in law, a bright and promising student. Her father was a pastor in the Adventist church, and once he got a phone call. The Lord had spoken through a nominating committee. He was offered a position in another country at the division headquarters of the church. So Sandra decided to follow her parents. She thought that she might continue her curriculum in another setting, in another country, but soon she discovered that it would be very, very difficult. So she decided to register to a French university and to study through e-learning, distance learning in absentia. Everything went well until she received a letter concerning the exam session. And guess what? Yes, only 1 day for the exam session, and it was a Sabbath. Sandra prayed to the Lord, asked him for help, and promised him that she would remain faithful to his commandment. She then wrote a nice letter and respectful letter to the president of the university asking for another date. She told the president that she would be ready to sit in a Sunday morning session or in a late evening session whenever, but not on a Saturday because she was an Adventist. She got an answer from the president saying, well, sorry, miss, we have a very old tradition in this university. Saturday is the only day for exam. Because most of our students are part-time students, so they work during the week, and the only day for them for the exam is a Saturday. We cannot change. Okay? No problem, thought Sandra. Dad is a very important man. He works at the division level, and he has many colleagues, well introduced, so they're going to write letters to the university president to fix the problem. So they did, writing letters with the heading of International Religious Liberty Association. That's a very important one for our church. And of course, you could imagine they used the best arguments. They were well-known defenders of religious liberty, and they wrote very good letters. But let me read to you the final answer of the university president to Sandra. Sandra, I quote, I have read many times your letters, because she wrote many times, the letters of your father, the letters of the representative of the International Religious Liberty Association. I praise you for your desire to remain faithful to your belief. I confess that I have been challenged by your argumentation. So that's interesting. I have been challenged by your argumentation. It convinced me to go back to the Bible and to read the Bible again. But, there's a but, I'm afraid I don't come to the conclusion that faithfulness to God is a matter of calendar, the calendar. I believe in a God for whom people are more important than days, for whom love is more important than strict and blind obedience. Therefore, Sandra, I will not change the university calendar. Either you show up for the exam, or, I'm afraid, you will be terminated. Sandra did not go. Sandra was terminated. Very sad story. Whether it is the direct outcome of what happened, I don't know, but Sandra is not a Seventh-day Adventist anymore. Of course, I know that you could come with many similar stories, but with a better ending. Nevertheless, I think this is a totally postmodern story. The university president reacted as a postmodern man, and his answer is a challenge to us. I believe that too often our presentation of the Sabbath is modern at best. But relevant, as powerful as this presentation has been and might still be today in many parts of the world, I think that if we use this kind of presentation in our post-Christian, postmodern Western societies, we might be in trouble, as Sandra was in trouble. But in addition to that, we might jeopardize the Sabbath truth. So, if I properly understand the title given to this presentation, Defending the Sabbath, it means to me that the Sabbath is under attack. And my first feeling would be, who I am to defend the Sabbath? Is it my job to defend the Sabbath? Could not God do the job himself? It is his Sabbath, it's not mine. At the beginning, it is his Sabbath. Why, Lord, are you asking me to defend your Sabbath? Let me tell you what is very important at the beginning of this presentation. I do believe that among the many responsibilities of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, indeed, there is this one, to defend the Sabbath. But I would immediately add to this statement that in order to win the battle, we urgently need to use appropriate weapons. If we use the good old traditional weapons, the weapons that our church has used for many years, and again those weapons are good and they might work in many places, but if we use those weapons, the weapons of our pioneers, the modern weapons, and we find them in many books, in many articles, in many pamphlets, in many flyers and DVDs published by the church on this topic. And again, they are good and they are relevant and they are powerful, and they are efficient. But if we use only those weapons, I'm pretty sure that we might never win the battle. So my purpose this morning is to introduce maybe new weapons. Not to delete the former ones, they still are good, but we need new weapons. Have you noticed in recent wars, let's say in Afghanistan or in Iraq, have you seen the weapons given to the soldiers? Very often, the weapons are not appropriate to the situation. We give to the British soldiers, to the American soldiers, we give them postmodern weapons. But this war, or these wars, are not postmodern. What about the enemy? Well, the enemy, they don't have tanks, they don't have high-tech aircraft. They are in caves. Many times the enemy is a woman, or the enemy is a child or a teenager, or the enemy is a very old man. You cannot fight against this kind of enemies with postmodern weapons. You need to find appropriate weapons, and that is exactly the same for us. We are, in our countries, in a postmodern setting, mainly, not only, but mainly. If we want to win the battle of the Sabbath, you understand that we need to use postmodern weapons. Otherwise, we might, again, lose the battle. So the challenge for us is the following. As a prophetic people, we are in between God and humanity. On the one hand, God's message. It's not our Sabbath, but it's God's Sabbath. On the other hand, we are not the addresses of God's message, but we are the means by which this message has to be presented to humanity. Faithfulness to the biblical message and God's commandments on the one hand, but necessity for us to speak to our audiences in an understandable language, or absolute necessity for us to use the good weapons, the postmodern weapons. There is a prerequisite to this challenge. It's what the missiologists call the incarnation principle. What is the incarnation principle? Can you read this one? That is a text taken from the first epistle to the Corinthians. Let me read it. Maybe it's too small for you. For though I am free with respect to all, have made myself a slave to all, so that I might win more of them. To the Jews, I became as a Jew, in order to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became as one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law, I became as one outside the law, though I'm not free from God's law, but I'm under Christ's law, so that I might win those outside the law. To the weak, I became weak, so that I might win the weak, have become all things to all people, so that I might by all means save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, so that I may share in its blessings. That is the incarnation principle. Have you seen the paragraph starts and ends with the same idea, to win a battle? And the two verbs underline the same idea, to save or to share the blessing. Well, you need to apply this incarnation principle, described here in 4 different situations. First, to be a Jew among the Jews. Well, of course, that was not difficult for Paul. He was a Jew. For us, if we are not Jew, well, it's going to be difficult to be like a Jew. Whoop. Second, to be a kind of legalist, someone who thinks that salvation comes from obedience only. Have you noticed that Paul said, I'm not like that? Not at all. Third, to be a kind of liberal Christian, that is to say, someone who believes that obedience is meaningless And Paul says, I'm not like that. I don't believe that. Number 4, to be weak among the weak. Could you imagine Paul being weak? Could you imagine that? Of course, I can't. Paul is such a strong man, stubborn. You remember the story between Paul and Peter in Antioch? Was Paul weak? Not at all. Could you imagine Paul being weak? I can't. But he said here, in order to win the weak, I need to become weak. That is the incarnation principle. That is to say that to meet people where they are, we need to go with them, we need to walk with them, we need to think like them. We need to have the same mindset, even though it's not ours. To go as far as possible with one limit only: no sin. Incarnation, yes. Compromise, never. Transgression of the laws, never. But incarnation. This is, I can tell you, a very difficult walk. A very painful one. A very challenging one, for sure, but we have no choice. Is postmodernism a good thing or a bad one? Is postmodernism a threat for Christianity or for the Adventist Church? Many would say, yes, it's a threat. Some would say, maybe not. That's not the problem. That's not the problem. We have no choice in our Western societies. A large part of the population is postmodern. Are they part of God's family? Yes, they are. And we want to include them in the family of God. If we don't think they are part of God's family, well, okay, let's forget it. Let's stop here and we can go and have a walk outside and visit Birmingham. If we want to save some of them, if we want to share the blessings of the Sabbath with some of them, we need to find a theology of the Sabbath which is relevant, which is understandable for them. Maybe we need to find or to build a fresh and renewed theology of the Sabbath, somehow different to the one we used for years and decades, even though this theology was good or is still good in many places, including England. So, let us start and try to find good weapons. First of all, let me come to what I call the inappropriate weapons. They are good, but I don't think they are relevant, and those weapons were used in the letters sent to the university president. So the first one is the fourth commandment weapon. Why do we keep the Sabbath? Of course, because of the commandment. We keep the Sabbath because it's God's commandment. Okay? The problem is that postmodern people, they don't like laws. They don't like rules. They don't like regulations. Any form of regulation for the postmodern non-believer, and for the Christian, maybe postmodern, well, they would say, come on, you Adventists, legalists. You are legalists. You believe that in order to be saved, you need to keep the commandments, including the Sabbath. But you are saved by grace, forget it. We don't need any commandment to be saved. So if we use this weapon, and of course, please understand what I'm saying, this weapon is a good one. But if we keep using this one only as a priority, well, you need to keep the Sabbath because of the fourth commandment, I think it's not enough. Another weapon, Sabbath and history. The Sabbath is as old as humanity. The Sabbath is the first institution brought by God in human history. The Sabbath has been kept throughout history. We have to keep it. It will never disappear. historical setting, historical presentation. That's good, a good weapon, but I'm not sure it will work today. Why? Because postmodern people are not interested in history. First, they consider that there is no historical truth. Second, they would consider that history has been very often manipulated. So they are even ready to revise history, sometimes in a very surprising and unacceptable way. Third, they are looking for something new. Newness is very important. Novelty is very important. And you are coming back to the beginning of humanity. Forget it. That's too old for us. That's not relevant for us. Next. Good weapon, but maybe not the best one. The weekly rest. God has provided the Sabbath because He wants us to rest one day out of 7. And the Sabbath day, we need to rest. Well, here, postmodern people are not against the idea of rest per se, but they live in a very deregulated time setting. Modern people work from Monday to Friday. They worked from Monday to Friday. Then they went to football matches on Saturday, and then maybe to church on Sunday. But what about postmodern people today? Well, they might work from Monday to Friday, but they might be on duty Saturday and Sunday because the shops are open. And postmodern people, they are very interested in long weekend. Well, where can I go for one day? That's not enough. I would prefer to work 10 days and then have 4 days of rest. And you come only with 1 day. I cannot fly to Barbados or to Malta 1 day only. I need more than that. So you come with only this weekly rest. We would like more flexibility, would say postmodern people. 1 day is good, but it's not enough for us. We want more to enjoy the many possibilities of our leisure society. Next, good weapon. The Sabbath is a sign of faithfulness. There will be a war between God's true people, the Sabbath keepers who keep His commandments, and those who do not, the beast and its image, the Sunday keepers. In order to be saved, you need to join the faithful group. That is a very good point. I want to keep this one. But is it a good one for postmodern people? I'm not sure. They hate dualism. They hate exclusivism or exclusiveness. Relativism is very important for them. Relativism in philosophy. What is truth? We don't know. What is reality? We don't know. Relativism in ethics. Okay, why heterosexuality? Why not homosexuality? Are you sure that heterosexuality is the norm? We don't know. Relativism. Relativism in politics. Well, do we see a big difference between the Labour Party and the Tories? Probably not. Do we see a big difference between the Democrats and the Republicans in America? Probably not. Relativism in culture. Every culture has to be recognized. No culture is superior, but also, of course, all the religions are equivalent. And you are coming saying that there is only one. No, we don't want this idea. We don't accept this idea. God is everywhere, a bit here, a bit there. God is in any church or in any religion. God is with the Christians, maybe with the Muslims, also with the Jews and with the Buddhists and with the agnostics. That's a joke as well. Postmodern people are fed up with religions which lead to wars. They are true descendants of Woodstock. You remember Woodstock? That was 40 years ago. Peace and love. No more peace and love. So you come with this kind of argument, they would say, well, we don't want this kind of tension, of exclusiveness, dualism. We want something better. Okay, so if those weapons are not the best one, what could be postmodern weapons? I would like to start with a presentation of the Sabbath, which is a bit philosophical. But you will see that it's a very simple philosophy. First of all, let me tell you that this presentation here, well, I start with a gun, but a 3-shot gun. You know which questions are very important? In philosophy, we have 3 questions. That is the first one. Where do I come from? I'm absolutely convinced that the Sabbath is the answer to these questions, the 3 philosophical questions, including the first one. All right? So let me come here to the first shot. Years ago, a French newspaper published a cartoon. You see this little baby? And there is a test tube. Daddy. Daddy is there. Artificial insemination. That was for the point, all right? Where do I come from? Are my progenitors in this test tube? Am I only an accumulation of biological cells? Am I the unwanted child? Is it important to have recognized progenitors, parents? Have you tried to obtain a passport or to renew your passport? What do you need? If you don't have a father, recognized father, you are lost. I had to go to the French consulate at London 3 weeks ago to renew my passport, and the first question is, who is your father? Do you have a proof of your father? And of course, you understand that Verrechia is not very French. That's an Italian name. So they are a bit suspicious. Tell us, what about your father? Do you have a proof that he is French? And because I can say, yes, my father was French and I can prove it, okay, I will be given a passport. But look, when you go to those consulates or embassies today, you have people queuing, trying to get a passport, but they don't have a father. Next to me was an African guy trying to go in between, and the lady said, no, sorry, I understand that you don't have French origins. Your father is not French. So you want a French passport? No, sorry. And I can check on my computer, she said to the man, that it is not the first attempt you made to try to get a French passport, but you will never get it because your father is not French. So if you don't have the good father, you are lost. Hundreds are queuing in Western consulates to have the passport or the ID. Hundreds are queuing in the offices of psychologists or psychoanalysts to try to discover who was the father, who is my father. What about the Sabbath? What do we say about the Sabbath? There is a link in the book of Genesis, and you know that by heart, I don't need to go back to the text, between the Sabbath and the creation. What about the Sabbath? The Sabbath tells me who is my father. God is my father. It's not my parents are not in this test tube. But when I celebrate the Sabbath, I'm going back to my progenitor, the good one, my father. The Sabbath reminds me that God is my creator. The Sabbath tells me where I come from. I'm not biological cells. I'm not the result of fate. the Sabbath tell me that God is not a hidden God or a distant God, but He is my real Father. I qualify for the best passport ever with God. But there is something more. Not only I'm given an identity, but in the creation process, I am given also a position and a responsibility. I am in charge of watching over the garden. You know that. I've been asked to keep the garden. And we touch here to what could be maybe a new perspective in our Sabbath. It's ecological dimension. Have you ever considered it? In our panoply to defend the Sabbath, this weapon could well be very significant to postmodern. Because you know that most of them, they are very interested in ecology. And I am not sure that we, as true Sabbath keepers, we always respect nature. I'm not sure that we take care of the garden. For example, we travel a lot. Or let us have a church meeting in Spain, or let us have one in Slovenia, or let us have one in Brazil. I've heard a good story in London last week. They are planning to go to Brazil to have a big campaign, 300. Okay. So what? Global warming? That's not a problem for us. And are we in those associations fighting for a better world as far as economy is concerned? Well, maybe we would think, no, they are too political. I would rather I would rather be interesting to have a church more involved in those movements than to be involved in wars in Afghanistan or in Iraq sometime. What an opportunity to meet people for whom the Sabbath could be a new and meaningful perspective. Second question, second shot. Who am I? That is the second philosophical question. I have destroyed the Mac. If it doesn't work, you will fix it. Please come. Very often we refer to the book of Exodus chapter 20 if we want to go back to the Sabbath commandment. But what about another text? Where do we have another commandment about the Sabbath in the Bible? Tell me. Yes, the book of Deuteronomy 5. And that is a very interesting story we have here. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord God brought you out from there with a mighty hand. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. You don't have here a reference whatsoever to the creation of God in 7 days. This text does not tell me that I've been created by God, but it describes my status, or more precisely, it describes a change in my status. I was a slave in the land of Egypt. I am not a slave anymore because the Lord brought me out of this slavery. Of course, we understand that there is a double meaning here. On the one hand, the specific liberation of the Hebrews from Egypt, but on the other hand, the general liberation from the slavery of sin. According to this text, the Sabbath is the commemoration of my freedom. I am a free man, says the Sabbath. Thousands of songs, actually Negro spirituals, have been written to retell this story of slavery and liberation. But surprisingly, we don't have that many songs written about the Sabbath and the liberation of the Sabbath. That is a bit surprising. And most of the songs written for the Sabbath, in fact, They don't have the Sabbath, seventh day in perspective, but the Sunday in perspective, and they call the Sunday the Sabbath. And we use them. That is very interesting in our church. But what is the point here? Rejoice, would say the book of Deuteronomy. You are free. Breathe. Enjoy. Stop working. Don't allow a boss, whoever, to put pressure on you, to tell you what to do and how to do it. Don't allow circumstances to drive you. Don't allow any agenda or time scale or any constraints to take control. You are not an employee today, and you cannot be an employer. You are all free. No obligation to produce or to achieve something. A time to breathe, as indicated already by Moses in Exodus 23:10. That is another text. 6 days you shall do your work, but on the seventh day you shall rest. And that is the explanation, which is very interesting. So that your ox and your donkey may have relief, and your homeborn slave and the resident alien be refreshed. So you don't have to produce in order to exist. You are more important than what you produce. You are not goods. You are not merchandise. You are not a mere producer or producing agent. Take control of your existence. Let me tell you another story, a very short one. A very famous Protestant pastor, actually the president of the French Protestant Conference. It's not an Adventist Protestant, it's not an Adventist conference, but it's a conference for the Protestant churches, that is to say non-Adventist churches in France. So that's a very important organization, and there is a pastor as a president of this organization. And we start as a church, Adventist church, to discuss with this conference in order to know if we could join them for different reasons or not. And then, here I quote, when he discovered through us the Sabbath truths, that is his conclusion. Please, I quote, keep the Sabbath, you Adventist. Please preach the Sabbath, you Adventists. Please share the Sabbath, defend the Sabbath, the same title we have. We as Protestants, we need it. Our postmodern society desperately needs it. And the last sentence is very interesting. The Sabbath is the antidote, the only antidote against materialism and capitalism. That's a strong one. Use it with postmoderns or postmodern people. I do believe that this other perspective could attract many postmodern people who are fighting for, let's say, a better justice, for better trade, fair trade, as they call it, for a better consideration of workers, for better work conditions in the world, for another economic system. I'm sure that you understand here that it's much more the Sabbath than a matter of day. The Sabbath should be a powerful agent of change in society. And postmodern people would love that. Next. Where do I go? Third shot. The Sabbath in its own will never radically change the world. We know that. A better world will never be the kingdom of God. Something will always be missing. But don't worry. In the Sabbath, we have also a bit of dream. The Sabbath deals with my present. I'm not a slave anymore, but a free creature of God. The Sabbath deals with my past. I know where I come from. But the Sabbath deals also with my future. In resting every Sabbath, I am given a foretaste of the paradise. So we would need to go to the book of Hebrews for that in chapter 4, the entrance into the promised land. But there is this sentence, there is a Sabbath rest available for the people of God. Please, let us make every effort to enter. I don't have time. I see the demon just in front of me. Is it a good one? Oh, for goodness. So, I know where I go. I know my trouble. I'm short of time. But you understand what I'm saying. Go back to the book of Hebrews chapter 4. Okay? Next. That was the three-gun argumentation, the three philosophical questions. But something more important than that, the Christological background of the Sabbath. Who was in charge of the creation? Jesus. Who was in charge of my liberation? Who is in charge of preparing a place in the kingdom of God for me? Could you understand what I'm saying now? Christ is the very important element, if I may say, in the picture of the Sabbath. And to those three philosophical questions, I have only one answer coming from the Bible. Jesus the Creator, Jesus the Liberator, and Jesus the one who is in charge of the kingdom of God. Don't put Jesus Christ at the center of the Sabbath. The outcome will be a complete disaster. And I do believe that we as Adventists, we are guilty of having given a poor Christian explanation of the Sabbath. We start with the commandment. Okay, that's good. But the calendar is not the main issue here. Still, it is an important one. But it's not a matter of the Pope and the Sunday. First of all, it's a matter of Christ. Without Christ, who declared that he is the Lord of the Sabbath, there is no Sabbath. Without Christ, you might keep the fourth commandment, but I would say it's the anti-Sabbath. Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for humankind and not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath. Too often, and I don't want to be critical here or cynical, we say in the church, well, in order to keep the Sabbath in a better way, we should go back to Judaism and see what the Jews are doing. I'm sorry, I'm afraid. A Sabbath without Christ, which is mainly the case for the Jews, unless they are Christian Jews, it is not the Sabbath. And if we want to give a solid ground to our Sabbath, we have to go back to Jesus' practice. So here is the text, a very long one, not a long one here, but a very interesting story, and I have 5 minutes to conclude. And I would like you to go to this text. I will go very quickly to analyze it. That is in the Gospel of Luke chapter 13. The crippled woman. So you can read it. I don't take time to read it. The crippled woman. Well, she was a silent woman in the synagogue. How long was she sick? Are you sure of that? 18 years. So 6 years are missing. That's another story, the 12 years, all right? She was sick for 18 years. Was she close to death? No. What was the problem? Well, the Greek text says she had a weakness. A weakness. Well, you don't die because of a weakness. And the weakness was in her back. So maybe a scoliosis or a lordosis. But she was sick for 18 years. If you knew this woman, let us call her Sister X, because she's not given a name at the beginning of the text. Okay, she was sick. She always has been sick, and she will ever be sick. So what? And Jesus went into this synagogue to teach. That is very important, to teach. So what is the content of the teaching? We don't know. If I am traveling in a train, seated there, and if I start talking with the passengers or in a plane, they would ask me, what is your job? If I say I'm a teacher, what will be the next question? What do you teach? So Jesus was teaching, command the evangelist. What was he teaching? We don't know. Yes, we know. To teach for Jesus is to do something. So she never asked Jesus, please could you heal me? Never. She was absolutely silent and quiet. And you know the story, Jesus healed her. And what is important in the story is the reaction of the leader of the synagogue. This one is teaching, and he is very upset and cross. You have 6 days to come in order to get a miracle. Please, come during those 6 days, but not during the Sabbath. And in this Greek text, there is a very small verb. 1, 2, 3, 4 letters. And this verb is very important in Greek and in Luke in general. I must. Jesus said to this man, I must do it today. Let me tell you, this man was right. I would support him. She could have waited. Jesus could have said to her, okay, sister, come tonight. According to the GC sunset calendar or calculator, sunset is tonight at 6:33 p.m. Please come at 6:34, and I will do it. She would have been pleased. Don't you think so? And Jesus said, no, I must do it today. Please go and check all the miracles we have in the gospel, miracles of Jesus during the Sabbath. And in those miracles, we have the definition of the Christian and maybe the postmodern 21st century Sabbath. It's not a matter of rest, but it's a matter of doing something for somebody. Jesus' Sabbath is a day to teach, is a day to fight against the evil spirits in Mark 1, is a day to restore the withered hand, Mark 3, is a day to make straight the woman here, is a day to heal from dropsy, chapter 14, is a day to make the paralytic walk, John 5. It's a day to give sight to the blind, John 9. In the postmodern societies, we have many blind men and women, many who are paralytic, many who suffer from many things we have here, withered hands. But you see, I'm doing a kind of symbolic reading here. Evil spirits. What are we doing for those? Is the Sabbath just to be among us in a nice building, you know? We start at 9 o'clock in the morning and we finish at 10 p.m., completely exhausted, but we have the Sabbath school and then the sermon and then the choir and then the youth meeting and social meetings and maybe a bit of evangelism. And what about the non-believers? My word to close would be, let us close the church. Well, that's too much. During the Sabbath, let us go to church only 1 hour. And then let us, the church, split in different groups and go to the hospitals and go to the orphanage and go to see the lonely people and go to see all those who suffer. You might say, well, we have 6 days to do that. Would you like to use the same argument than the opponent of Jesus in the synagogue? I must do it. When we want to keep the Sabbath, we are working for humankind. as Jesus did. If we do that, we could have the question from our neighbors, friends, what are you doing today? I see that you are doing a lot for the poor, Why are you doing that? Because of the Sabbath. Because of Jesus. He did that. He gave me so many blessings that I want to share those blessings. Thank you. Well, the last word maybe. Sorry. I need to renew my PhD. You know what is PhD? Push here, dummy. And there is a new version of it for the touch pod. Touch here, dummy. Okay, that is very important. A day to give an identity. If you go to the story of the woman, she was without a name at the beginning. Read the text, and Jesus said to her, you are the daughter of Abraham. You are the daughter of Abraham. The best name ever for her.